This is a program about abstract art. It's a subject that can be as heavy or as light as you like. For me, it's just natural, because I'm always doing it, so I'm thinking about it all the time. But I also think about basic questions that many people have. How do we respond to abstract art? Is it supposed to be hard or easy? Is it about something, or does it exist entirely on its own? You see abstract artists chucking paint around. Why be so vague? But then when they're precise, how does that help? These could seem unanswerable questions, but abstract art has been around for 100 years now and is an ongoing thing. By exploring the private world of living abstract artists and looking at some key figures from abstract art's history, I'm going to show you that in fact there are answers. Amid complicated and potentially confusing works, there are hidden rules you might not expect. Hey.
Hello, Matthew. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you. Hello. No gap?
No gap. I'm going to get you to take some of it off.
Oh, yeah, okay. I work every day in a studio, paint abstract paintings based on patterns, together with my painting partner, Emma Biggs.
You know how sometimes you get scrapes into it?
Yeah.
Can you get some scrapes into it?
Yes. That comes
Yeah,
through it.
that
Okay.
it.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. But Emma's really the generator of the colours. She thinks them up, she physically mixes them, she mixes up the paint, and she places them. And I'm the applier. It's a kind of double act, which most of the time the main emphasis is on what comes out of Emma's head.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The history of abstract art is really a history of experiment. So a lot of things come up for experimentation. You know, you've got colour theory art, people who do very honourable and serious type of art based on scientific ideas of what makes colours zing together. And then you've got abstract art, which is all about accident. But all of them are trying to find some kind of visual metaphor which will be rich enough for what one might call reality. Art is partly ideas and theories, but it's really only anything at all because of how it looks. Looking is something you have to get used to. Here are some abstract squares, the kind of thing people often glance at and then turn away from, baffled. The one on the left is by Mondrian, a famous figure, and the one on the right is by Lyubov Popova, who's less well known. We'll be meeting both those artists later. Each painting has shapes that echo the basic shape of the thing they appear on, the square shape of the canvas. In hers, you're seeing squares stretched out, fragmented, morphed into triangles, tilted so they seem flying or full of movement. In his abstract squares, the colour is stark, based on contrast. With hers, the colour is continuous and sympathetic. The grey and the pink are a softer version of the harder black-red-white relationships. The grey and the pink take the eye back gradually, making space throughout seem three-dimensional. So opening up to abstract values is an adventure, and you start by being willing to look. The dynamism of the way in which shapes are placed prevents you from reading that white as if it were a hole that can be seen through. It reads clearly as over the other colours. That's not easy to pull off. It depends on the minor displacement of angles everywhere. Pink follows red, and grey has a blue-green character that also complements the red.
It's the colour in Popova's painting that contributes more than anything else to the difference between her squares and Mondrian's squares. If abstracts have got something to do with reality, but the artists aren't going to picture reality, why not? And what reality are we talking about? Art had been expected to picture reality according to approaches and styles that were acceptable to most people. A lovely landscape by Rubens. But then, in the 19th century, new ideas about reality meant Cézanne could picture reality as patterned shapes. In the early 20th century, the Cubist painter Braque responded to Cézanne by picturing reality as flattened space. A few years later, abstract art responded to Cubism with shapes and spaces only. People's sense of what was real was up for grabs because everyday existence was full of rapid change caused by science. Artists saw spirituality as both a challenge to the power of science and a way of harnessing it. This counterintuitive idea came from the spiritual movement of Theosophy, which was founded in New York in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky. Blavatsky took aspects of Eastern religion and aspects of science, mostly evolution, and came up with a spiritual movement based on evolution of the soul. Abstract art started at the very peak of Theosophy's popularity. People thought spirituality was like X-rays or infrared radiation or electricity. It could be revealed. There were a lot of different artistic takes on the spiritual, but the strangest was the earliest. Hilma af Klint, who was born in 1862 and lived and worked in Sweden. These are paintings by her from 1907. For decades, nobody knew about them, but recently they've emerged and started to be exhibited all over the world. From totally invisible, she's become the main excitement about historic abstract art. A woman doing abstraction, plus doing it so it's full of meaning. What kind of meaning? Abstract artists were into spirituality, but af Klint thought of herself as being in touch with actual spirits. She conducted seances in this room and received messages from spirits who were called the High Masters. She produced 23,000 pages of notes, working out what the High Masters were telling her to paint. It was all theosophical meaning. Theosophy says colours and shapes can symbolise the soul's journey. The tip of a coloured pyramid is the soul arriving within the golden circle of pure spirit. And there's pure spirit, Theosophy claims, when dark is balanced with light, masculine with feminine. All af Klint's paintings are profoundly theosophical. The not theosophical thing about them is the general look. And this doesn't come from spirits, because, to risk controversy for a moment, there is no such factual thing as a spirit. They are mental projections. To have the ability to create such a mental projection without suffering debilitating mental illness is a fantastic thing. But when it comes to creating a work of art, a mental projection alone isn't sufficient, because art isn't made just from visions. It's made from visual traditions. The other abstract artists, rooted in the visual traditions of painting, explained themselves only partly by spirituality. With her, it's everything. It was beamed down to her by a high master on the astral plane who commissioned paintings from her. She knew what the reason was. So that those down on the earthly plane, if they've enlightened themselves enough, might benefit from them. And that could be you, so keep an open mind. It was only recently, decades after her death in 1944 at 82, that Af Klint became known. Now her work is categorised as the first abstract art, but there's very little evidence she thought of it as art at all. Rather than abstraction, type of art that didn't exist in 1907, she thought it was direct meaning. To us it looks like abstract art, but it's really diagrams explaining theosophical ideas. To see what else there is to abstraction, you have to look elsewhere. The Russian artist Vasily Kandinsky is the lord of abstraction. He said it was created from inner necessity, and it didn't need nature to picture. It contained all of nature anyway, just in abstract art's shapes and colours. He meant the artist's sensitivity, his feelings and memories, are full of nature's impressions. They can be got down onto the canvas in a completely abstracted way. This is a painting by Kandinsky from 1912. Its title, Painting with Black Arch, encourages you to think about only what you're seeing. That black arch is unmistakable. But Kandinsky knows that seeing art is a heightened seeing. It's made loaded by you being very visually alert and by your thoughts and expectations being primed by some kind of theory. The Book of the Lord is called On the Spiritual in Art. Kandinsky published it in 1911, and it was read throughout Europe. It was the first moment of abstract art becoming widely known. Like Hilmar af Klint, Kandinsky was inspired by Theosophy's notion of a coming new age of the great spiritual. Kandinsky's artistic approach was different to Hilmar af Klint's, though. She thought paintings were diagrams to be interpreted by study. He thought the actual materials of painting, colour, shape, line, could be manipulated to affect the soul. His line moves across the paper. It's captured on film in the 1920s. He's in his 60s and has been painting abstractly since he was in his late 40s. Making a mark, he doesn't know in advance what's going to happen, because he's not copying anything, but his instinct for making is guided by his experience of making, judging what works, what doesn't.